So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this very, very important, very happy, wonderful occasion. And we can see it's not raining, it's all very special. I first of all would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the original custodians of our land, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, and acknowledge the people of the many nations who live in our city. And I would like to ask Rowena Welch-Jarrett to do the Welcome to Country.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Rowena Welch-Jarrett, and I will be performing your Welcome to Country this morning. I would like to start this cultural process by acknowledging our elders past, our elders present, and our ancestors, all Aboriginal people, all Torres Strait Islander people, and all South Sea Islander people here today, as well as distinguished guests in attendance this morning. It is an honour to be invited to conduct the Welcome to Country at the annual City of Sydney Australian South Sea Islander Recognition Day flag raising ceremony. Ceremonies like this are important for our country and communities in the process of truth telling and moving forward, in acknowledging the dark history of blackbirding and the recognition of South Sea Islander communities and their many contributions to our country today. I am a proud Dharawal Gumbaynggirr woman. I was born on Gadigal land with Gweagal, Bidjigal, Wangal and Gadigal, among other Sydney Basin clan bloodline links. My maternal grandmother is from the Timbri family of La Perouse, and I come from an unbroken line of Kooris, born here in Sydney pre-Cook. My people traditionally were fishermen and shell workers. Those cultural practices are still continued through our shell work art, our fishing and gathering, and our continued work caring for country. Traditionally, we moved about following fishing seasons in this very harbour, surrounding rivers from as far south as Wreck Bay and as far north as the mighty Hawkesbury River, never taking more than we needed from our land and our waterways. My family still live and work on country out at Lapa, in Redfern and surrounding areas. And much like today, traditionally many nations gathered around the Sydney Basin area because of its great cultural significance and to ensure that cultural knowledge, practice and law were passed on. Often moving around amongst our Sydney people and surrounding areas, we would follow customs such as being welcomed onto country by neighbouring nations or nations whose country we would pass through for reasons such as ceremony, marriage and trade. This traditional custom was carried out to acknowledge our ancestors, people of the land past and present, acknowledge their customs and their law, and to respectfully adhere to those customs and laws whilst on country. In turn, this ensured your safe passage through country. So it is with these experiences, the knowledge passed down to me, the bloodlines within me, and on behalf of Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, that I'm honoured to welcome you to country. I welcome you to this country, Gadigal country, land of the Gadi, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome. I would also like to acknowledge you all, wherever you may have come from, for being a part of the continuation and celebration of our cultural practices and recognising the contributions of our South Sea Islander brothers and sisters today. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Rowena. So I would like to acknowledge His Excellency Mr. Samson Vivell Fair, the High Commissioner of Vanuatu, Kerry Hackett representing the Honourable Tanya Plibersek, Minister for Environment and Water and Federal Member for Sydney, Alex Greenwich, the Member for Sydney, of course Rowena Welch-Jarrett you've just heard from, and very, very importantly, Councillor Imelda Davis. Our star today, Chair of Australian South Sea Islanders Port Jackson and City of Sydney Councillor. I'd like to welcome the board members of the Australian South Sea Islanders particularly from Port Jackson, the Very Reverend Father Dr. Shanudu Mansu, General Secretary of the New South Wales Ecumenical Council, members of the Consular Corps from Canada and the USA, Pastor Ray Minikin, who will be delivering the prayer, City of Sydney councillors, Councillor Hai William Chan, Monica Baroni, our CEO, and we have Kim Woodbury here, our Chief Operating Officer too, and I can see other members of staff who are here. Thank you for being here to show your support for this very important day and for our very important Councillor Imelda Davis. And finally, a very warm welcome to the elders and the members of the Australian South Sea Islander communities in Sydney. This is your day, and I know Imelda's very excited. So I will speak first of all to welcome you and say a few words, and then I will hand over to Imelda. She's going to be our MC. So in April this year, Councillor Imelda Davis brought a motion to Council asking us to acknowledge the shameful blackbirding trade that forcibly brought thousands of South Sea Islanders to Australia between 1863 and 1904. Their descendants are with us today, and like their forebears, continue to contribute to the culture, the economy, and the diversity of our city and our country. It's truly time that they were acknowledged, and so the City of Sydney today officially acknowledges them and their contribution, raising the Australian South Sea Islander flag for the first time over Town Hall. The motion passed by Council in April pledges us to raise this flag annually for Recognition Week on August the 25th, every year from now on, to investigate programs to make the wider community aware of the experiences of South Sea Islanders, and to investigate a potential dialogue forum bringing together the Australian South Sea Islanders with city staff, cultural institutions and other relevant groups and individuals to identify priorities and build frameworks to achieve long-term community priorities. We also pledge to advocate to the state and federal governments for more equitable outcomes. The flag we are going to raise today is a symbol of those commitments. Thank you, and welcome, Imelda.
Wow. Thank you, Tomas. Thank you, Rowena, wherever you are, for your wonderful welcome to country. And thank you to the local Metropolitan Aboriginal Land Council. I too would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, one of the 29 clans, their elders, past, present and emerging leaders here today. I'd like to acknowledge our Torres Strait Islander families that are here today, Auntie Joyce Waimara, and the LKM representatives, Thelma Quarterly. There's so many of you here that have supported the struggle for Australian South Sea Islanders, and I just want to acknowledge you all in the crowd because there's so many dignitaries and I'm just overwhelmed today by your presence, and I'm really grateful, or we are really grateful, that you came this morning at such an early hour to celebrate with us this recognition. This year's 175 years since Australian South Sea Islanders, or South Sea Islanders, were stolen off the islands of Vanuatu, New Caledonia, and bought by Benjamin Boyd, a celebrated entrepreneur, to build his economy or his rich business in whaling and cotton industries. We need to remember those people, our forebears. We need to remember that this country was built on the backs of 60,000 Pacific nations men, some women, 5% of the trade, and children unaccounted for. My grandfather, my mother's father, was 12 years old when he was stolen off the island of Vanuatu. He and his two friends, as well as my great-grandmother, stolen off Umbai and brought here as a young girl at the age of 14 to work on a plantation in far north Queensland, Illawarra Plantation, Maryborough. And so many of us here today, our South Sea Islander, Australian South Sea Islander elders, families, the Togo families. I'd like to acknowledge our board as well, Danny Togo. The City of Sydney has been formidable in putting this notice or supporting this resolution, and I want to thank the staff, Lord Mayor Clover Moore for your advocacy, Alex Greenwich, and so many other people, Monica Baroni, just for your courageousness and working with us. I better get on with the business. I shouldn't be talking too much, but I'd like to welcome someone who's been by our side in representing our Vanuatu government, has advocated relentlessly since his appointment here in Australia, the Honourable Sansom Vilvil-Whare, Vanuatu High Commissioner to Australia.
Thank you and good morning. Eres Rorpong, Ipasmetevaren. I just want to say thank you to Imelda for inviting me today here, and also Clover Moore. Thank you so much, Lord Mayor, to invite me and come and give some few words of from Vanuatu government on the behalf of the 175th anniversary of the Australian South Sea Islanders. And I'd also like to thank all of you for being here today. So let me start with my business, and before I forgot, thank you to the staff of Sydney as well, the City Council, but also the City of Sydney for organizing this for us today. Let me just go on with the business now. I have a short speech. It won't be long. It will be very short because I know we have important commitments after that. So I would like to begin by doing the welcome to country in Bislama. You might wonder what Bislama is. It's a language that was created and formed in the sugarcane plantations in 1800 by Australian South Sea Islanders who were stolen, kidnapped, or lured to come and work in sugarcane plantations in Australia, mainly in Queensland and in New South Wales. So it goes like this. Mi wantem statem tok blong mi today, blong pem respect blong mi golong ol keta custom man, mo woman blong nasara wa yumi stop blong hem today. Ol keta people blong gadigal, blong nation blong yora, mo mi wantem give him respect blong mi igolong ol keta ol fala, blong ol keta, blong yesterday, today, mo ol keta, mo long ol keta ya we ol stop come yet. Mi wantem extend them respect blong mi too, igolong you fala everyone way stop today long place ya. Wa you falay kat bloodline wa temol kata brother mo sistablo mi ol kata aborigines mo Torres Strait Islander well stop te delo pesa mo you falay share same history wa temol kata ya we oli kolemol kata Australian South Sea Islanders. I will be forever indebted for the safe passage across this country. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders ancestors have accorded me in my journey across Australia while I'm on posting here. I also want to call upon my ancestors as a traditional leader of the big numbers on the island of Malekula in Vanuatu to guide me and help me as I navigate through this journey in Australia. I would like to extend my deep appreciations to all Australian South Sea Islanders, elders, past, present, and emerging, and those that have dual or tricultural background and share bloodlines with our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders family. I acknowledge your presence and pay homage to you wherever you may be. But before I continue, I would like to acknowledge dignitaries that are here with us today too. Forgive me if I forget to mention your name and titles, as this was not my intention. Honourable Alex Greenwich, Member of Legislative Assembly of the Parliament of New South Wales, Lord Mayor Clover Moore of the City of Sydney, this beautiful city, Miss Imelda Wasikam Davis, Chair Lady of the Australian South Sea Islanders, Port Jackson, and also Councillor of City of Sydney. Esteemed Councillors of City of Sydney, the staff of the City of Sydney, representative of the Office of the Honourable Tanya Plibersek, MP and Minister for Environment and Water, Professor Leland Bandler, Ms. Kim McKay, CEO of the Australian Museum, Monsieur André-François Giroux, Consul Général du Canada en Australie, representative of the United States Consulate General in Sydney, senior elders from our Aboriginal communities, senior elders from our Torres Strait Islanders communities, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol respected. As the Vanuatu High Commissioner to Australia, I am deeply honored to stand in front of you today to commemorate this historic day. Today marks 175th anniversary of slave trade that brought a dark history to both of our countries. It is estimated that there were over 60,000 Pacific Islanders, most of them men, from Vanuatu, Kiribati, Fiji, Tuvalu, New Caledonia, and PNG, where most of them were either forced or stolen and brought to Australia, particularly in New South Wales and Queensland, to work in sugarcane industry under harsh conditions or slave-like conditions. Out of this figure, it is estimated that 3/4 of them were from Vanuatu alone, the country that I represent today. Back in the old days, Vanuatu was known as New Hebrides. It is known that Vanuatu provided the biggest cohort of workers under the blackbirding era, whereby men and women, children were kidnapped and put on boats to come to a new land that they have never heard of. I could never imagine the pain, the suffering, and the trauma that our people have endured on their journey to Australia, especially knowing that some of them would never make it back. The pain and suffering are real, and the trauma continues to haunt all of us today. A little history of Vanuatu. So Vanuatu is an archipelago of 83 islands, spanning across 1,600 kilometers from north to south. Blackbirding trade has had a profound negative impact in Vanuatu as it depleted its population while it lasted. Many families across Vanuatu Islands have lost their loved ones from blackbirding trade. Our people came from the islands of Tanna, Ambrem, Santo, Ambai, and Pentecost, to name a few. And many would die on the no-return maiden voyage to Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, I have had the privilege of traveling across this country, and it seems almost unbelievable to see people that look like me and have familiar surnames as our mob back in Vanuatu. I have come across amazing communities of Australian South Sea Islanders who have contributed immensely to the economic and social development of Australia. Australia is now home to many of them. As I sat and listened to their stories, I would discover great pains that family carry with them in terms of not knowing their family's history or where they belong to in Vanuatu. Some have managed to trace back their roots to their islands of origins in Vanuatu and Solomon Islands and other Pacific Island countries, but many are still left without a sense of belonging. Ladies and gentlemen, today, with the current labor mobility that Australia has with 9 Pacific Island countries and Timor-Leste, Vanuatu workers are still dominating the agricultural labor force once again. They too face significant challenges across Australia in terms of pastoral care and welfare. Having worked closely with Australian South Sea Islanders communities across Australia, I can attest vividly that together we have provided crucial support to our workers that are contributing heavily in the economy of Australia. I thank the Australian South Sea Islanders communities as well as the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders communities, wherever they may be, for the support they provided and continue to provide to our workers from the Pacific and Timor-Leste while they're here in Australia working. The support you provided will not go unnoticed. While traveling across Australia, I had visited many resting sites where our families of Australian South Sea Islanders are laid to rest. It breaks my heart to read family names that are so familiar to me on headstones, but more so to notice that some of them died so young, in their 20s and their 30s. History has shown that a huge number of workers died of malnutrition and other diseases such as chickenpox, measles, and other common diseases that could have been cured. Today, we are gathered here to commemorate those that have made this journey to Australia and never made it back home, but also to commemorate all of you that are here today in continuing and fighting for representations in Australia. This land bears witness to your history or our history that we ought to remember not only on the 25th of August every year, but to remember it in our daily lives. We must not be afraid or ashamed of our common history. In fact, we must teach it to our young generation, because by knowing our history, through truth-telling mechanisms, it will enable us to move forward as a society in a holistic fashion. We understand that Australian South Sea Islanders are distinct ethnic groups in Australia that have evident kinship with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, that they are recognized by the Commonwealth and states governments in Queensland and New South Wales, and just recently in 2022 by the City of Sydney through a notice of motion, and for which I thank the Lord Mayor Clover Moore. I thank the Commonwealth and states and territories and LGAs for recognizing the Australian South Sea Islanders. But it should not stop at the government levels. Instead, it should trigger right down to service delivery level, whereby specific programs and supports are put in place for our Australian South Sea Islanders families and their families. Overmore, the recognitions of Australian South Sea Islanders should not only happen in Australia, but it must also be done in the Pacific through political and technical level and through community channels, especially in our various islands where we share family bloodlines. I firmly believe that this can be done if we work together at all levels. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome the recent announcement by the federal government to increase its support towards the Pacific through development supports in various sectors, including people-to-people connection. I also welcome the recent announcement of having an Indigenous voice in Australia's foreign policy, and I strongly believe that there will be more initiatives put forward on cultural diplomacy to strengthen the Pacific Step Up across the Pacific and Australia. Speaking of the Pacific Step Up, it is more than ever crucial that Australian South Sea Islanders are an integral part of the Step Up program. This is mainly because, one, Australian South Sea Islanders are our first Pacific diaspora in Australia, and two, they understand the development challenges and the savoir-faire or the know-how of the Australian systems as a whole. By involving them in the design of the programs and projects targeting the Pacific region, this would lead to positive returns, such as reconnecting them back to their roots, and two, re-establishing deep linkages between Indigenous people of the Pacific Island countries and Indigenous people in Australia, and three, strengthening ties between Indigenous people of both Australia and the Pacific with the non-Indigenous people. To summarize, you would understand that Australia and the Pacific are intrinsically connected through their common history over centuries. Today's event clearly demonstrates our shared history, although not bright one, but one that we can look forward in turning into something positive. Australia and the Pacific Island countries share a lot in common, and most importantly, being Indigenous lands inhabited for thousands of years. Our history reminds us that we are bigger and better, that we can work together for a brighter future for our families. In moving forward, it is important that truth-telling should be privileged. Truth-telling is a powerful tool that can heal open wounds. Truth-telling is part of our culture and our traditional practices for centuries in the Pacific. But truth-telling will not happen if we do not work in a collaborative manner. In that regard, I pay my utmost respects to all our elders, past, present, and emerging, who for years have been advocating on the plight of our people in the spirit of truth-telling. They have worked tirelessly to advocate and promote Australian South Sea Islanders, their work and their contributions to Australia and the Pacific, especially to Vanuatu. They use their wisdom and talents to achieve great successes, not only for their people, but for the society as a whole. Once again, this day should remind us all that together we are stronger and divided we fall. So let us work together to build a bigger and better and solid communities of Australian South Sea Islanders, notwithstanding the efforts put put in by our First Nation families, including non-Indigenous families as well. I once again would like to pay my utmost respect to you all, especially Australian South Sea Islanders Port Jackson and their founding members and elders, namely Auntie Nellie Inares, Auntie Shireen Malamu, Uncle Graham Muni, Auntie Carrot Pangas Ni Togo, Evis Deguara, Uncle Victor Korowa, and Auntie Dr. Bonita Mabo. I also wish to extend my respect and appreciation to their board members, Mr. Shola Diop, Mr. Danny Togo, Ms. Bennett Diop, Ms. Melina Fakatava, and again, our councillor, Ms. Imelda Davis Wazikam. May I seize this opportunity to wish you all, proud Australian South Sea Islanders across Australia and elsewhere, a wonderful and happy Recognition Day. And I do hope that this day will enable all of us to reflect back on how far we have come and plan together for decades to come. I thank you all for listening.
I'm just slipping in here to make two other acknowledgements that I didn't make before. Councillor Lyndon Gannon from the City of Sydney and Mayor Zoe Baker from North Sydney. Thank you both for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Your Excellency. Formidable speech. Formidable. I'd like to now, I'm just so privileged to have these young ladies here. Excuse me, Alex, it's just a short performance before you. These are our families from Tweed Heads that have come down to dance for us today, and they're called Pacific Jewels. And in saying that, I want to recognise the Tweed as one of the longest standing Australian South Sea Islander associations who advocated for recognition of our people, and Auntie Faith Bandler, who actually headed up that recognition, and her daughter's here today. I know the High Commissioner recognised that, but I just want to pay homage. So Pacific Jewels are going to perform now. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandy. This is my auntie Talisha and my sister-in-law Leilani, and we are Pacifica Jewels. I would like to start with acknowledging the country that we are on today, Gadigal country, our elders, past, present and emerging, and any and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. We are from Bundjalung country around the Kudjambara area. We are very, very privileged to be here today. We are fourth and fifth generation Australian South Sea Islander, and Leilani was born and raised on her mother's island, Tatuba. We come from Umbai, Palma and Santo. We have been mostly trained in Polynesian dancing, and when this opportunity came up to learn the Nahuatl dances from where we're from, it was a really enlightening experience for us. It really helped us feel reconnected to where we are from. So thank you for this opportunity, and we hope you enjoy our dance. Thank you.
Casa
lele o kasoa. Kamana, kamana, kamana le tofina. Inai launa tamambo, lele o kasoa ri. Love you guys. All right. Thank you so much, Pacific Jewels, and we're going to see lots more of these people. I just want to acknowledge and introduce a formidable man, someone who we've collaborated with for the last decade and has been instrumental in New South Wales recognition in Parliament, Member for Sydney, the wonderful Mr. Alex Greenwich.
Good morning, everybody. Can I also start by acknowledging the traditional owners of our land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. And can I thank Rowena for that very warm welcome to country. Can I thank the Lord Mayor Clover Moore for hosting us here today at Sydney Town Hall, His Excellency the High Commissioner of Vanuatu, City of Sydney councillors and staff, and especially the wonderful and inspiring Councillor Imelda Davis. One of the very first meetings that I took as the member for Sydney when I was elected 10 years ago was with Imelda and a delegation from Australian South Sea Islanders Port Jackson. In that meeting, I was shocked for a couple of reasons. Firstly, shocked to hear about Australia's appalling history of slave trade and blackbirding. I was disappointed to hear of the lack of proper recognition from governments for that. And I was disappointed in myself for not knowing about this, for not have heard or been educated about the Australian South Sea Islanders blackbirding and our slave trade. So from that meeting started a wonderful journey with Imelda to see our New South Wales Parliament formally apologise for the treatment of Australian South Sea Islanders, for the blackbirding that happened 175 years ago, to work towards proper recognition of that contribution and support for the Australian South Sea Islanders community by working with Multicultural Affairs in New South Wales. I've also worked with Imelda to see the Australian Bureau of Statistics properly count and acknowledge the number of people with South Sea Islander heritage in New South Wales and across Australia. And just last December, I was so proud and so excited to see Imelda elected to the City of Sydney Councillor as the first person from Australian South Sea Islander background to be elected to the City of Sydney Council. And in that role, she has supercharged her support and her advocacy for Australian South Sea Islanders, but for all of Sydney's communities. And we are here today because of Imelda. Today is an important day of celebration for the Australian South Sea Islander community. It is an important day of acknowledgement of the contribution made, and it is an important day of remembrance of the slave trade, of the blackbirding that happened. And we must always remember to make sure this never happens again. Can I thank you all, and can I especially endorse the words of the Vanuatu High Commissioner that we must teach this in our schools. We must educate generations of Australians. We must learn from our history. We must grow from our history, and we must make sure this never happens again. Thank you all, and especially thank you, Imelda.
Thanks so much, Alex. We've got another performance coming up. It's another formidable human, the Toby Cedar Bullas, and they're going to be performing the Shark Dance. Australian South Sea Islanders have an evident kinship with Torres Strait, our Melanesian families, and this is the first of a lot of reconnections with our mob. We know who we are. We know where we sit in this community, but at the same time we need visibility. So I believe you're also Lifu descent, is that right, Bella? Yeah, come out and say hello. Yeah. Toby Cedar, everyone.
Deputy Mayam. First of all, I acknowledge the custodian of the land, elders present today, past and emerging. Today we're going to do a shark dance we call Bezam Cup from our Kamikiran Nation, Meriam. This is my boys that will perform. We are called Mui Mui Boomer Gedlam, deep sounds from home. just want to say what a great honour today for this occasion for the flag raising today. Also Sydney City for today, and I'll finish off by saying big thank you. Awaswa.
How good was that? I just want to quickly say and acknowledge that yesterday we raised the flag at Petersham Town Hall with Mayor Darcy Byrne and Councillor Pauline Lockie and other councillors, and they raised the flag and moved a notice of motion in 2018 recognising Australian South Sea Islanders. I'd also like to recognise our Christian brothers Lewisham Principal and students today, Principal Valencia, these young men up the back here, too deadly, because they also raise the Australian South Sea Islander flag at the school every year. And I just want to thank you for that since 2019. Dr. Ian Hoskins, who I've also worked with over the years, my apologies, is so emotional today, and I just want to recognise Linda Ben Mesher from the former New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies, and the One Talk Solomon Island representatives here, Peter Terry and the mob, our family, our One Talks, welcome. And we're going to see you perform later at the Maritime Museum and Redfern. So we have an evident kinship with some 7 Pacific nations, all Pacific nations, but in particular Solomon Islands and Vanuatu were key islands blackbirded to Australia, Tuvalu, Kiribati, New Caledonia, Papua New Guinea as well, and Fiji. Next up, excuse me, Shark Dance. Elijah, come out, my brother. Yeah. This young man is a formidable spoken word artist, and he's going to do an ode to blackbirding, and I met you through the Australian Museum. I'd also like to acknowledge the Australian Museum because we've done a lot of work through recognition and posting, and I'm not sure if Kim McKay is here today, but yes, I just want to thank you for the ongoing work that they've done, and also Dr. Murray Geisler down there in the crowd, who's been contributing and working with us for the last decade. Come on, Elijah.
Good morning, Sydney. I just want to say thank you to the traditional owners of this land, past and present. I want to say hello to the elders here. I want to say welcome to our excellence. What's up, brother? Also, I just want to say what I'm doing today is a spoken word poem. It's dedicated to blackbirding. And yeah, I just feel like, my bad. But I'm going to let the word speak for itself. So I dedicate this to the fallen, the past. Here we go. And the poem is called Blackbird Forever. They said, let us pray. My ancestors closed their eyes. After that prayer finished, they had our land, we had their Bible. My ancestors became aliens in lands never voyaged. Slaves for cane fields. Home became Blue Bayou, a song that turned to a dream, but the dream never came true. The cries of my ancestors have been heard. For purposes worth it. To go against the grain is my soul's last mission. A rebellious lost son with a God-given mission. I heard you cry. For purposes worth it. I stand strong and represent because of you. I walk with my ancestors with my head held high, with no fear because of you. I named my movement Blackbird. That's because of you. I scream Pacifico first. That's because of you. Blackbirding the trade, Blackbird my name. I took what they labeled us from acts so treacherous. Resurrected the slaves, forget the riches and fame. My ancestors' tears never dried, so who's to blame? My ancestors' cries have been heard. I collected your tears and your fears, and I used it to blossom a broken words from concrete. Long live the blackbirds. Blackbird forever, forever blackbird. Thank you, City of Sydney.
Thanks, Elijah. This is a man that needs no introduction. Pastor Ray Minicon has been a formidable force across Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs and Australian South Sea Islander recognition, and I'd like to invite him to the stage.
Thanks, Imelda, and thanks all of our dignitaries here today. Sam, thanks so much for your speech, Alex, and our dear Clover, and all the other dignitaries that are here today. I too have ancestries back in the South Seas, from Vanuatu. My grandfather on my father's side was taken from Ambrym Island at the age of 12 years old and brought into Queensland in the Maryborough, Bundaberg area, where he met my grandmother on my father's side. And my great-great-grandfather on my mother's side was taken from Santos Island. So my name Minicon comes from Ambrym Island, West Ambrym in particular. And Lingwadoc name from on my father's side comes from Santos Island. And I'm also on my dad's side from the Cubby Cubby people, or Gubby Gubby people in southeast Queensland, that Glasshouse Mountains area. And on my mother's side is Gurang country, which is Bundaberg, just north of Bundaberg there. And actually we have a property up there that's been in my grandmother's. She bought it many, many years ago. It's been 120 odd years. And many of our South Sea Islander people found refuge on this little property just north of Brisbane there. But we still have it in our possession not under native title, it's under freehold title. And so we have a long relationship with all of our people all the way through Queensland. And I acknowledge all of our elders here today. If there's one issue that is very important for me too, and that is our global crisis in climate change, or climate crisis really. Last year I attended COP26 and I came away disillusioned, disappointed, disgusted, angry. And there was only two of us. I'm also the co-chair of our Indigenous Peoples organisation in this country here, with a beautiful lady called Kathy Etok. And so this year, when I came back, I said we must get more of our young people there. This is their future. We need their voice. They need to hear their voice at this COP27 here in Egypt, at our brother's country over there. Looking forward to visiting your country soon. But we need to have a voice in Egypt about the incredible crisis that all of our countries in the Pacific are facing. And they're serious. I mean, we could be losing Kiribati and Kiribati within the next 5 years. We could be losing islands in the Torres Straits. We could be losing a lot of our fish and our waters and our forests because of the ways in which foreign countries are coming into our countries and robbing us and destroying our environment and destroying our communities and our people. We need to be there. We don't need a voice in Parliament for that. but we do need a voice at another level. And many times at these particular conferences, one of the voices that where we want to put our people is at the G7s, the G20s. Because those countries in those particular regions are the ones who invaded us. They're the ones in my country now. But do we have a voice? No. So we need a voice in those particular areas. So young people, you get your voices all dusted up and ready to go. I'm here to pray. Otherwise I get a little bit more excited about talking about these big issues that our globe faces. Let us pray. Creator, you have given all peoples a common ancestry. And it is your will that we all be gathered together as one family in your love. So fill the hearts of all humankind with the fire of your love and with the desires to ensure justice for all. That justice is sharing the good things you gave us all, that we may secure an equality for all our brothers and sisters throughout the South Pacific and throughout the world. Help us put an end to division and strife and war. May there be a dawning of a truly human society built on love and peace. And Creator, grant us a vision of your world as your love would have it. A world where the weak are protected and none go hungry or poor. A world where the riches of creation are protected and shared. Everyone can enjoy them. A world where different races and cultures live in harmony and mutual respect. A world where peace is built with justice, and justice is guided by your love. Grant us the inspiration, the courage and the leadership to build it through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
We're now going to raise the flag. I'm not sure what the protocol is, but I'd like to invite the aunties that travelled from all over Togo Mob to please come up. These are our families. Travelled far and wide to be here today. Okay, if everyone just looks up. Sorry. Thank you everyone again. Really appreciate it.
Now if we could just have everyone to the front steps and we'll take a nice big group photograph. So everyone can come up and line up on the stairs here.
Great. Yes, okay, great. And while you're doing that, everybody come up onto the steps, please. While you're doing that, I'd like to invite everyone or people who need a lift to the Australian National Maritime Museum. We're having coconut scones and pancake and more performances. So to the left here, there'll be cars to assist people. And then after that, we're going to Redfern for lunch at 12:30, and we're going to have, I know, the Bullas on steroids, some great performances and song and symposium. So please join us. Yeah, sure. Yep. All right. Right. Let's go.
Thank you for babysitting, Eddie.